Welcome to Boyd's Car Classic. Welcome to week 3 of the F100 builds. Tons to do, so I'm going to dive straight in. It's been a real week of ups and downs, so let's just dive in and see what happens, eh? Okay, so we're going to tackle the fuel supply issues we're having. So what I did was pull the fuel line from the fuel pump, so the in. I blew air up it, and we opened the fuel tank, and you could hear that the air was traveling through, so the line was clear. And what we've done now is just attach this fuel pump to it, and we want to try and pull out any crap that's in there and see what state it's in. Sadly, we've had this running for a couple of minutes now, and I've got a clear line on it down here. I don't know if you can see that, and nothing is coming through. So I'll leave it running for a little bit longer, but at the same time, what I'm going to do is, Dan's here again. Give us a wave, Dan. I think what we'll do is, sadly, the fuel tank has been all carpeted, so I'm going to have to pull this all out. But what we can say quite confidently, because the fuel tank is in the cab, and the cab is in this unbelievable condition. If you look at the cab corners, it's as good as I've ever seen. So I think we can say with confidence that the fuel tank is not rotted out, but obviously it smells, very varnishy. And I think if we pull off this carpet, we might be able to get the sender unit and have a look inside and see what's going on from the top. 'Cause I think we might need to get it out and give it a clean. Okay, we got the fuel sender out and it looks manky, and that's not good. No float on the end, so gonna need another one of them. Get the seats out, and we've got some treats. Oh God, what we got a plectrum. That's always good, and some money. What's that? What is that? Yeah, American. So the seats obviously haven't been out since it's been in the UK based on that. So it makes me think a lot of this work was done before it got over here. But it looks like it's had some rodent action at some point in its life there. So we will give it a hoover out, and then we'll get the fuel tank out and have a proper look. Okay, so we've decided to empty the fuel tank. So I've rigged up again the fuel pump. I'll just empty it out into this gas, and then we'll have a nice bonfire. All right, so the fuel tank is out, and it looks, as suspected, in really good condition because it's in the cab, so unlikely to get any rot in there. There's a lot of sort of stale fuel in it that I've drained out everything, and I'm just going to give it a good pressure wash now, and just basically wash it out until the water coming out of it is nice and clear, and then I'll be able to put a new fuel sender on it, put it back in. We've blown air through the lines, so we know they're clear as well. So hopefully if we can get this clean, put the fuel sender back on it, get it back in the car, we should be able to start running it off its own fuel system for goodness knows how long. So that's quite exciting. So I think the biggest task of this week really is to try and get this fuel tank clean. There's a few options really. I did look at actually paying someone to clean it, so I contacted a local business, Kempston Radiators. Unfortunately, due to the dimensions of the tank, what they would have done is chopped it in half, and they wanted me to go and then get it bead blasted somewhere else, then they were going to seal it, etc., and it would have been very expensive. I can get a new tank from Rock Auto. It cost me about £450 to get it here, so that is an option. But given the budget, what I'm going to try and do is clean out the tank and reseal it. So I've sent off for this product, POR 15. They have like a tank sealing kit. So it comes with like a degreaser cleaner. So that's the first thing I'm going to do is clean it out. Then you treat the metal in it. So once you've cleaned it out, you rinse it out, get it all dry, and then you treat it. And then finally what we do is we'll seal it with this stuff, which I've used before. It's kind of almost smells like resin kind of stuff. So you coat the inside of the tank. So I'm hoping, this was about £100. To buy a new fuel tank was 450, and to try and get it actually repaired would have been even more than that. They said they couldn't give me an exact cost. So fingers crossed we'll be able to do a job with this. So I'm going to do the cleaning part first, which basically means dropping this in, 4 parts water to 1 part of this, so I'm going to chuck that in, and a couple of things of hot water. I've sealed up all the other holes with gaffer tape, just to make sure it doesn't leak out, and I'm going to be using the fuel sender hole, which is the biggest hole, to kind of fill from. I just realised I didn't cover up one of the breather holes there. So the kettle is boiled. I'm going to throw this in, basically slosh it around. You'll notice I have a bucket on the floor there, a big tub, and that's because this stuff you don't want to pour down the drain. So I'm going to be pouring it into there and then disposing of it at a hazardous waste place, which is the right thing to do. So let me go and grab my kettle and we'll get cracking. The smell of varnish. People often, you've probably heard people say before that old fuel smells like varnish, and if you've not experienced that before, I remember the first time I did, and I was like, someone poured a load of varnish in this fuel tank. It smells so indescribably like varnish, and yeah, it really does smell like wood varnish. So yeah, you'll know when you've got to stay off fuel. Okay, so the tank is now not full, but it's got 2 big boiled kettles full of water and the degreaser. I've sealed up the hole now, and now I basically just need to slosh it around. I need to do this for quite a while, probably about 20. I suppose if I slosh it around for a few minutes, then what I'll do is leave it to sit for about 20 minutes, and then we'll drain it all out and do it again. Now what a lot of people suggest you do is chuck a load of old bolts in there, or some people say walnuts, something to kind of knock stuff off the tank. But the nature of this tank, the dimensions of it, I think if you try to do that, you'd never get them out again, because it's so long and thin. And you can hear there's stuff in there. I know the float off the older fuel sender's probably still in there. And the good thing is it's not leaking anywhere. Right, so it's been in there for half an hour now. I've regularly sort of sloshed it around, try and get into all the crevices and stuff. And now what I'm going to do is empty it into that big thing there. Some of it's already leaked out a bit, and I can see that it's looking very orange. So yeah, I'm going to empty it now, and we'll see what comes out. It smells so bad. Stunk out my whole unit. I'm not very good at this. Right, so dispose of all that. Then I'm going to flush it with water, and then I'm going to do the same process again. So it's going to need 2 runs. Looking at the state of that that's come out, I'm not sure if you can see that, but yeah, ooh, not very pretty, very smelly. So I'm not sure if you can hear that, but it's still dripping. I found a leak. I was at the stage of cleaning, so I did 1 clean cycle, did 1 rinse cycle, took it, put water through it, and was about to start the 2nd clean cycle, and there was a leak there. I'm not sure if it's where I've been putting it down and stuff like that, but like I say, it's going to affect my profit quite a lot because it's a big expenditure. And obviously, annoyingly, I spent £100 on the sealing kit, but thankfully I didn't use the seal or the tank prep, so I can keep those for another project, and they're the big expense. Sadly I don't want to risk it. So in theory the tank sealer would be able to seal up that hole, but like I say, with the fuel tank being in the cab, and with my sort of sense of pride and wanting the vehicle to be as good and as safe as possible, my reputation as someone who's just started a business, I think the best thing for me to do is to sadly consign this one to the great fuel tank Sky Palace and get another one. So it should be with us early next week, and it'll be nice to throw a nice new one in there as well. So never mind, these things happen. But, we've learned a little bit along the way about cleaning out tanks, and I'm happy that I don't have to do this job anymore because it absolutely stinks. So, oh well. And time to do a job which isn't going to be much fun, but will be worth it in the end. So I've already started here, just wire brushing down the chassis and removing like obsolete exhaust hangers, anything like that I find along the way, so it's nice and clean. So inside and out, what I'm going to do is pull back all the wiring that's kind of run up here, so I can strip that all back and then I can rerun that as well. So I just want to get the chassis nice and clean, and back to sort of bare metal, so I can then give it a coat of paint and it'll look really good under here. So what I'll probably end up doing is doing up to where the cab is, and then later on when we've got it running and driving, I can then drive it onto my ramp, get it in the air to do under the cab as well. But I think while we've got the bed off, everything's really visible, it's worthwhile giving it a lovely clean up lick of paint so we know it's going to be good for another 60 years. All right, so I've cleaned, wire brushed, and then wiped down the chassis with alcohol. And now, I'm going to paint it with some black chassis paint, see if we can make it a bit more shiny. So I've got this Tetrasil chassis paint. You can spray this on if you thin it down a little bit, or you can brush it on. I was thinking about spraying it, but I'd have had to lay down floor and moved everything out of here, and I think by the time I've masked everything up and all that stuff, it would have probably taken the same amount of time, albeit the finish might be a bit better. But I'm going to brush it on old school, then I can get in all the crevices and stuff. So yeah, boring job, but necessary. Oh, look at that. Look at the shiny shine. Yeah, I'm pleased with how this is looking. That paint's really good. It's kind of that sort of self-leveling, so you can put it on pretty thick and then it sort of levels out. I'm going to leave it there for today because I'm at the point where I need to do like inside the chassis legs and I keep accidentally attaching myself to the wet paint. So I'm going to stop it there, let those bits dry, and then I can then do the other bits on the other side as well. But yeah, what a difference, you know, it just makes it look so good. And like I say, I always think with a rat, what you want to make sure is that the bits that are important, like a chassis, they're in great condition and looking shiny. So yeah, we'll leave that one overnight to dry and then I can do the rest of it. And yeah, that's pretty much us finished under here, barring wiring. Okay, the next little job to tackle. So I've connected up the choke, no problem. So I found the choke cable, connected up to the mechanism. That's working great. On this side, we've got a little bit more work to do. So this is the throttle linkage here. And it's got a threaded bolt on the end of this, which is connected up, but the issue you have is this is just a bolt. So when that's moving, it's going to gradually basically undo itself. So what I want to do is put what's called like a rod end or a helm connector on the end, which is like an eyelet that you can bolt through, which then will move without unbolting basically. So in order to fit that, what I'm going to do is cut this rod here, and then I'm going to put a thread on it, an M6 thread, and then we can thread on the helm, and then we've got the throttle linkage all working properly. It was just kind of thrown on there for now, so I'll do that now. So the linkage is out of the vehicle now. I chopped it down, cleaned up the ends, got it nice and straight, and I'm now going to use this die to cut a thread. So this is a 6mm rod. This is an M6 die, so this will cut an M6 thread onto the end of it. So I just need to basically offer it up to the end, make sure it's nice and straight, and then start cutting the thread into it, which will then allow us to thread on the M6 fitting. Let's have a look at that then. So as you can see now, I can focus, nice threaded rod, ready for the fitting to go on the end. So another little job ticked off. So what I did, as you know, was I modified the throttle linkage, threaded the end and fitted a helm connector on the end. So that will now connect nicely to the throttle. But we also need to think about this, the kickdown cable. So I actually have now climbed underneath the vehicle and identified that it is a TH350, which is what I thought it would be. And which is good to know, I suppose, in case we want to service it. But I think, like I said, that it looks all right. So the kickdown, basically, if you've ever driven an automatic car, the kickdown is responsible. If you floor it, it will drop down a gear to give you that extra bit of speed. And that cable basically communicates with the gearbox and tells it to change down. So what it needs to do is basically actuate at the point that the throttle is sort of nearly fully open. So when it feels that you put your foot down on the throttle, it should let the transmission know to change down, give you a bit more speed. So there's a linkage for that. Now I was going to bend up some metal and make one, but it would have looked a bit janky, and I was able to find one relatively inexpensively online. And this basically mounts off this corner bolt of the transmission. You put the kickdown cable, this part of it, into there, and then this sort of long part of it, I'm not sure what you call that, fits onto this fitting here. So what it does then is the linkage will move through, and then only when it gets to fully open will it then pull on this cable, and that'll tell the transmission to change down. So I'm going to fit this all up, and then we know that the carburetor and all the controls are then all fully ready to go. Okay, so that's all connected up now. So as you can see, we have the throttle is now connected. And when you pull on the throttle, what it will do is obviously accelerate the car, and then at the point that it gets to sort of full throttle, it will then push the kick down cable, which will then notify the gearbox to change down a gear. So that's all good. The only thing I need to do now is to connect a return spring to keep the throttle closed, which I will attach down here as well, and it will attach up to this. So I don't know if I've got one. I think this is the old one here, but it looks a bit tired. So if not, I will get myself one. All right, well, I threw that spring on and it actually works well. So yeah, that all good. Clearance is okay. All seems to be doing its job. Like I say, we've already connected the choke on that side. So that is the carburetor fully plumbed in, wired up and ready to go. So the next thing I want to look at is the cooling system. So as you can see here, there's no fan on the front of this. And I think part of it is if you look how the engine is mounted, because it's obviously a non-standard engine, it's leaning back slightly. The fan would be pointing up at the top of the radiator. So it probably wouldn't make sense to run a standard fan on the front of the water pump there. So what I'm going to do is fit an electric fan instead, which I will get to ordering and get to fitting up next week probably. But in the meantime, what I want to do is to check the state of the thermostat here. So I'll pull these pipes off. So what that will do, once the engine gets up to temperature, the thermostat will open and allow hot water from the engine block to then flow into the radiator for cooling. So the fan will then cool that as well, or just moving along, and the job of the radiator is to act as a heat sink and cool down the hot water too. So obviously if this thermostat is gummed up and not opening, then it won't be allowing the hot air from the block to flow into the radiator to be cooled, and that's where you get overheating problems, which are obviously a death sentence for vehicles. You'll get, you know, head gaskets will go, oil will get into the water, etc., etc. Bad news for engines. So we want to make sure it's all good. I want to basically undo this and have a look what's going on under there and see what sort of state the thermostat's in. Do I need to replace it? Do I need to spend some more money? We'll have to see, because again, it's essential, and if we have to do that, then that's what we'll have to do. I just thought I'd show you quickly. I pulled the coolant hose off, and there's some nice green coolant in there, although I've dropped some gunk in there. So that's a good sign. Probably means that the thermostat did open when we were running the engine the other day and let some coolant out. But I'm still going to pull it open, still going to have a look and just see what's going on in there. Right, so there's the thermostat. It's all looking a bit gammy. So I'll give this a clean and we'll pull it out and inspect it. Yeah, I don't know what this is, but yeah, we'll pull it out and have a look. So the thermostat housing looks all right. I've given it a good clean, and I think that's going to be very serviceable now. We can still use that. The thermostat doesn't look too bad. I guess we'll need to, might price up, see how much it is to get one, if I can get one locally. Or maybe we'll test this one and see if it works before we throw it back in, because it would be a shame to replace it for no good reason. All right, let's do some science. So this is the thermostat currently closed, so no coolant would get through. I'm going to dunk it in this boiling hot water and see if it opens up. Give that a minute to do its thing. Or not, as the case may be. Let's have a look. No. This is a dead thermostat. I think I need to get a new one. Right, so I'm getting to the point where I'm going to want to move this soon, just to make sure it goes backwards and forwards and everything like that. And also because it's blocking my lift, which I need to use for various things. So in order to do that, I need to start thinking about mounting everything up. So one of the first things will be to mount up the air tank. So This, as I've kind of said in previous videos, I'd like to mount under the cab, out of the way. I think it'll be neat and tidy. So I'm thinking sort of here. I don't think it'll foul anything. That space is unused and it just makes sense. So what I need to do basically is measure out from the chassis rail how far this needs to come out so it clears the chassis rail like this. And then what I'm going to do is cut out some bits of box section and weld them on as brackets for these brackets here. So I'll do that now. I'll do some measuring up and then we can cut down some box bracket and then we can tickle it on with a welder. Right, so having measured up where the bracket, how long the bracket needs to be, I've cut down the lengths of box and I've measured up the distances between the holes, and I'm now going to drill those holes straight through so we can bolt through the whole thing, make sure it's nice and sturdy. So I'm just going to use my center punch to mark a center point for the drill to sit in. That was rude, wasn't it? Sorry about that. You fall over there. Oh dear. A few too many last night, was it, on a Saturday night? Right. This is my crappy old tripod. I got a new one for Christmas, which is much better. So apologies, that's why I got a new one. I lost a good camera to that tripod. So if you notice the video quality diminishing slightly, that's why. But I'm saving up for a new one. One day, maybe when I've sold the F100, I'll treat myself to something. But at the moment, fuel tanks take priority. Such is life. Right. So, make sure you can see this. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how interesting it is seeing me drill holes. But what we do now, we've got a center punch. What I'll do is I'll just start drilling. I'll make a little divot like that, and then I'll just put a little bit of lubrication in that little divot, just to protect the drill bit. This is a cobalt drill bit, and I don't want to ruin it because I have to use it quite a lot. And then we drill through. One down. Move along. I know what you're thinking, why is your vise so small? I just can't afford a big one at the moment. I'd love to have a big vise, the proper work, like metal work table, and again, all part of the one day plan. But yeah, like everything, it's all about money, innit? There we go, a nice bracket, ready to bolt the tank to the truck. So I'll now go and weld this onto the chassis. Right, it's time to do some welding. So I have measured out where I want the tank to sit so that I can run the airlines where I want them to go. I've clamped this down, made sure it's square. This is the bracket that we just made. Connected up my earth leads as close as I can to where we're welding. I've cleaned up the bottom and got some of the paint off there so that we're not welding onto paint or crappy metal. I've disconnected the battery from the vehicle as well, so that's important that you do that for welding for good reason. I can't remember what that good reason is, but I know that it is good reason. And now it's just going to be a case of running basically stitching it on. So I'll do a couple of taps, then go around and stitch it on. Make sure it's nice and solid to hold the tank. So the tank isn't mega heavy, but equally we still want to make sure we're doing a good job. So yeah, as always with welding, it's going to be a really uncomfortable position, but that's life. Right, we're getting no arc, which would suggest it's not earthing.
In the room. Soon, one morning, death come creeping in the room. Death come creeping in the room, and I know.
All right, so that's the brackets welded on. Probably not the prettiest welds you've ever seen. That one's a bit better than that one. But we're going for strength, and I think we've got that. Let's test it. Right, let's give him the 17 stone stress test. Works for me. Houston, we have a problem. So all my wonderful work there, I think I'm gonna have to redo. As you can see, the tank is sitting proud of the chassis rail, which I knew was going to happen, but I thought there was clearance, but actually the bottom sort of rails of the cab will foul that. So I could either cut notches out of that, which I'm reluctant to do because I don't want to compromise the strength of the bed, or do this differently. Now, one of the other things I've noticed is that the chassis sort of tapers out slightly. So you can see that one side is slightly higher than the other, which annoys me as well. So I think I might have to come up with another solution, and potentially what I'm thinking is making like an L-shaped bracket out of box section, which I can then bolt onto the chassis that way, that I can then get the height right and get it square, and make sure that everything sits nicely and the clearance is good. The other thing would be to sling it under, but I don't want it to be too low because I don't want it to end up bashing into stuff. So I think that's what I might do, is cut off all the welds that I've just done, which is going to be really hard because they're so strong. And yeah, build like an L-shaped bracket that I can then bolt into this chassis rail that way. That will mean we've got a bit of opportunity to then configure it correctly. So you live and learn, and again, we'll chalk that one up to experience, and I'll do a little bit more work maybe today. I might leave it for next week because I can't face it right now, but we'll see how I feel maybe tomorrow. So I can now add Thermostat to the ever-growing list of parts that I'm currently waiting for, which is making for quite a frustrating week, where I don't feel like I'm making much headway. And I always feel like that, I think, because I'm extremely impatient, and I just want everything, now, done now. But you can't rush these kinds of projects, unfortunately. And like I say, I want to do a really comprehensive job of making a really well refurbished vehicle. One, like I say, that will command a good, strong price point. Like I say, I'm gunning for £15,000 on this truck. It's interesting that the market is so flat at the moment, but funnily enough, when I see kind of cool trucks, C10s, F100s, especially ones that have stuff like air ride like this, that market still seems to be quite buoyant. And I think especially for someone to know that it's fully sorted and they can just drive it away and have some trouble-free motoring, really fun motoring, and it can go to shows and all that kind of stuff. I think it's well worth the investment in time and money to make sure we do a good job, I suppose. So replacing all these parts, like I say, whilst it puts a little bit of stress on in terms financially, and keeping an eye on that bottom line and making sure that I make a profit out of it, because it's not just about the financial investment, I suppose, it's the investment in time. And I'm already kind of 3 weeks into this build now. And obviously that's 3 weeks that I need to pay myself for in a sense. So that I need to be quite careful with. So I thought about what other jobs I can do whilst I'm waiting for it. And I have like a load of parts ready to go on, like that's more finishing parts, if you like. So interior parts that were missing. I've spent a lot of money to make sure we've got some of the original parts for the interior to make it perfect. Things like mirrors and all these nice shiny new things, a new stereo. And the temptation is for me to dive into that stuff, but I have this kind of compulsion where I don't want to do any of the kind of finishing bits of the project until the basics are done, until it's roadworthy, until it's nice and clean and the chassis is all sorted and all that kind of stuff. And I'm reluctant to jump to the end, because it's, in a way, that's the fun bit, you know, that's the crowning glory. For me, that's the last week or two of the project when you're finishing things off and making it perfect. So one of the things that I've started looking at now is the handbrake. So I never really use handbrakes on classic cars because, especially an automatic classic car like this one, because you just stick it in park and that will lock the transmission and hopefully stop you moving anywhere. But again, we're gonna have to get this MOT'd, so that's gonna be essential. And there's things like that, things like I need to put wiper washers on and stuff like that, which are gonna be needed for the MOT. So that's something I'm gonna need to address. So for the handbrake, as I said, the rear axle's from a 90s Thunderbird, so there needs to be a little bit of modification to make it link to the handbrake in the F100. So the handbrake cable's a little bit short. What I've done is purchased an extension, and I've fabricated up a little bracket basically to hold the two handbrake cables that are coming from the rear axle. They will pop through these and they clip in, and then we can then clip the handbrake cable connector from the front of the handbrake to those. And I need to build this basically to make sure it's got clearance, because it's so close to the prop shaft. So this is going to sit just under one of the chassis rails. I think I'll rivet it in to make sure there's plenty of clearance. And then we will then plug in those two handbrake cables, attach it to the front handbrake cables, and then we've got a handbrake, which, you know, is a good thing, I think. So I just used a bit of length of angle, cut out the holes to the correct size, cleaned it up a little bit, and that's ready to be riveted on and all connected up. So I'll get to doing that now, because it just feels like, you know, it's some progress in what has been quite a frustrating week, I suppose. So you might be able to see under there the bracket that I've just made. I've drilled the holes, got the center rivet in already, and I'm just going to rivet the two sides on it as well. Like I say, you can see how important clearance is with the prop shaft where it is. So that's kind of why I've decided to use rivets as well, because they just offer the best sort of clearance. Once they're on, there's nothing. They don't really stick out at all either side, so there's no issues with clearance there. So once I've riveted this on, we can connect up the handbrake cable. It's also quite satisfying riveting, and it looks very neat and almost factory, which is cool, because neatness isn't usually my thing. So I'm turning over a new leaf as part of Boyd's Cart Classic. So there we go, that's riveted on. We can offer up the handbrake cables. So these guys are actually, they have the fittings that they push into a bracket, much like this one, obviously. So I'll just pop that in there, and that will clip in. Likewise on the other side. Cool, and now we can connect the other end as well. Okay, so that's the handbrake cables connected to that bracket under there, and then forward to the handbrake cable coming out the cab there. So the clearance is a millimetre. I'm hoping that that will be enough. What we may do, if it's struggling with clearance, when the cab's back on, I could probably put a sleeve just to hold that up a little bit, just keep it away from the prop. But what that should mean now is we have in an old truck like this, you get a foot handbrake. So the pedal down the bottom to put it on, and then that lever to pull it off. So let's see if I apply the handbrake, if it does its job. So there we go, I'm not sure if you saw that move. And now I'll pull the lever to release. Yeah, I think that did its job. Let's try that again. I think I need to just get it a bit tighter on the bolt underneath there. It's a bit fiddly, but by and large the mechanism is working. Happy days. Another job ticked off the list. So that's the end of week 3 of the F100 build. As I say, a week that's been quite frustrating in parts, and there feels like there's lots of kind of loose ends that well, hopefully I'll be able to start tying them up next week. So the fuel tank has just arrived. It's Friday afternoon now. Desperate to get that in. Now we've got the fuel system pretty much ready to go. And then there's, yeah, like I say, we can start to really see some progress, because this week, like I say, feels like everything I try and do, I get stopped by needing to get a part or something like that. But that's the nature of these projects. I'm sure for you guys at home, if you've ever tried to tackle a classic car build, or indeed any build, car or motorcycle build of any sort, it can be really frustrating at times. And I think I'm in the privileged position, at least, that I'm here in the most part 5 days a week, which means that if you do have a bit of frustration, then you have to push through it, you know. Whereas sometimes if you've only got a limited time to do something like that happens, it can put you back weeks. So I am conscious that I'm in a slightly privileged position, and I'm still really, despite what it might look like in the cover photo, I am still really enjoying myself. So next week, tons to do again. I want to get the fuel system in and ready. I might make a start on welding in the wheel tubs as well. See how far I get with this, with the other bits. If not, that'll be the week after. I've got, the cooling system, so things like the fan, fitting them in and tackling the electrics then, really. And then, like I say, we can then start to see some real transformation. My dream really for next week is to be able to drive it out of here, so I can give it a good wash before finishing painting the chassis and stuff like that. So fingers crossed I managed to do that. It's been, like I say, an interesting, exciting week. I've actually bought myself a new daily vehicle as a tow vehicle, so that kind of took out some time. And I am selling my van now as well, so I've been kind of doing bits for that on the side. So there has been a few distractions along the way. I also drove down to Brighton to pick up some parts for the next project, which is already I'm collecting parts for. So yeah, it's still been a very productive week. And again, I hope, it's weird, I have this extra pressure because I'm trying to create these videos for you, and I'm always like, have I actually done anything this week? And it's quite cathartic when I sit down on a Friday afternoon, which I'm about to go home and do now, to actually reflect on and look at everything you've done, and to see that whilst there might be baby steps, they're the steps that still need to happen at some point in the process. So I'm just perhaps not doing things in the order that I would have loved to have done them in, but I'm still ticking off those jobs as we go. So as always, thank you so much for watching along. Please do like and subscribe, tell your friends, and let's keeping these vehicles on the road, eh? Have a good weekend. See you next week.